2020, along with her 10 years of coaching experience dedicated to helping clients embrace their whole selves. That was an interesting bio, Sarah.
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
That was an inspiring bio. You have done a fantastic job and the stage is yours. You can continue with your presentation.
Thank you. Am I live now?
Yeah, yes. You are live here.
I can't see me.
Yes, we can see you. You can continue.
Can you see me?
Yeah.
You can see me, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So good morning, everybody. Thank you for that introduction. My name is Sarah Veall. I'm an accredited transformational coach, inner child practitioner, equine facilitated coach, and master Reiki practitioner. So I'm also a member of the Association of Coaching. So all of my coaching complies with the AC's Code of Ethics and Competencies. So I'm going to talk to you today about love versus fear. So living a heart-led and healthy life beyond the labels of a mentally constructed version of reality. So what does that actually mean? When I was thinking of what I was going to talk about today, a quote from one of my favorite books popped into my head. And that is from The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. So he said, maybe the journey isn't so much about becoming anything. Maybe it's about unbecoming everything that isn't really you, so that you can be who you were meant to be in the first place. So my presentation to you today is based on my personal story and my healing journey, and my 10 years of coaching experience and ongoing commitment to deepen and develop my coaching practice, so that I can be a clean and safe container for my clients. And also in accordance with my professional body's code of ethics, but also so I can understand myself at a deeper level so that I can be the happiest, healthiest version of myself. So I'm a lifelong learner, and I believe that the more we learn, the less we actually know. There's an awful lot that we don't know out there. And if we think we know it all, we definitely don't. So my presentation today is based on my beliefs and my truth. And we all, of course, have our own truths based on our own history, our own values, our own beliefs, and our own experiences. And I'm offering my perspective and sharing my story. And I hope that some of you will resonate with it. So I'm currently writing a book about my healing journey. And I've got a link to a free guide about how to live a heart-led and healthy life based on my own story and my own experience. So I'll give you these links again at the end of the presentation, but please do go ahead and click on either of those QR codes if you'd like to now. So when I had a career change and I did my first coaching qualification, my postgraduate in business and personal coaching 10 years ago, little did I know the journey of self-discovery and growth that it was going to take me on. In my early days of coaching, I found myself working really hard to think of good questions so that I could support my clients to raise awareness of what they were doing or not doing or could be doing differently to make positive changes in their life. But I had limited awareness of what was going on in my body at that time, or what was going on in the 95% programming in my mind that I now know was controlling my thoughts, my feelings, and my behavior. So Dr. Bruce Lipton, who's been a source of inspiration to me over the years with his work around epigenetics and how our beliefs shape what manifests in our bodies, said that 95% of your life is coming from your unconscious program. Your life is a printout of your subconscious, and the things you wish, desire, and work hard for may not always be supported by the ingrained programming that you have. But what would your life be like if you learned that you're more powerful than you've ever been taught? So when I retrained in equine facilitated coaching in 2018, and that's working with horses to support individuals to understand themselves at a deeper level, to understand that 95% unconscious programming, so that they can heal and grow. I underwent a year-long, deep therapeutic and healing process. And I started to make the connection between the mental, the emotional, the physical, and the energetic aspects that make up ourself. And I started to unearth limiting beliefs and parts of myself lurking in the shadows of my unconscious mind. Parts of myself I didn't like or I hadn't necessarily acknowledged. And I started to recognize that the mental, the emotional, the physical, and the energetic aspects to myself were all actually one system. And that just working with my mind was not going to shift the patterns of fear and shame that I had to be perfect, or I had to be perfect to feel like I was good enough to belong, or that I couldn't speak my truth and express how I felt in case I was rejected or abandoned. All of those patterns seem to be stored deep inside my unconscious programming and stored deep inside my body. I started to realize that just working with my mind and intellectualizing things or reframing situations that hadn't gone to plan, whilst that was helpful, wasn't going to enable me to connect with the trapped emotion in my body and heal emotional wounds which had created limiting beliefs and perceptions about myself. Perceptions that I wasn't quite good enough, and I couldn't speak my truth because I'd be rejected or abandoned, or I'd upset people or cause conflict. And I started to realize that just working with the mind wasn't going to enable me to reconnect with the parts of myself I'd rejected, as I'd learned to believe they weren't worthy of love, connection, and belonging, all of those emotional needs that we have as human beings. And it wasn't going to help me reinstate boundaries to create a solid sense of self and show myself that I was safe and loved. And it wasn't going to help me be the parent I needed to be for myself, to allow myself to feel whatever emotion I needed to feel and learn how to take the message from that emotional signpost and express it in a healthy way that didn't break down relationships or cause disease in my physical body because I'd suppressed it. So my training into equine therapy in 2018 rerouted me on a journey of deep healing and reconnection with my whole self, where I threw myself into a holistic approach to mental, emotional, and physical health, including Reiki and energy healing, meditation, kinesiology, homeopathy, and yoga, to name a few. And they all supported me through the death of my mother and the breakdown of my marriage. Then, as my life appeared to be entering a new chapter, I was hit by the biggest shock of my life, a cancer diagnosis in 2020. A cancer diagnosis that rocked the whole foundation of who I thought I was. A foundation, as I now know, that was built on a mentally constructed version of who I thought I was, based on limiting beliefs and perceptions that I'd learned to believe about myself. A foundation that needed a cancer diagnosis to smash it apart and unearth the actual solid foundations of who my heart and soul always knew I was. The truth of who I was always meant to be in the first place, as Paulo Coelho says in The Alchemist. The truth that the body is a self-healing organism with cells that are constantly regenerating. It will heal itself if we create the conditions for it to do that. The truth that we're not separate from nature, we are nature, and a holistic approach to healing supports the body to come back into a state of homeostasis where it's able to heal itself. I needed that cancer diagnosis to reconnect with the wisdom of my body and heal the unprocessed trauma and emotional wounds that were creating stuck energy in my body and stopping it being in a state of homeostasis and flow where it could heal itself. Further training in 2019 and 2022 as an inner child practitioner and transformational coaching with body wisdom led me to a deeper understanding of trauma and how it gets stuck in our energy and ultimately in our bodies. So quantum physics and Einstein's theory of relativity and his famous equation E equals mc squared defines the equation for energy. Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. So on the most basic level, the equation says that energy and mass, or matter, are interchangeable. They are different forms of the same thing. So every object has an enormous amount of energy within it. But quantum physics shows us that the amount of energy potential within the space between the solid stuff is exponentially larger than the energy within the solid matter. So the space between our cells and the space between our atoms is the source of the most extreme energy on the planet. So just living in a three-dimensional physical world and defining our reality by biology or by solid stuff around us massively reduces our potential and our power. So if our cells are constantly regenerating, why do we hold on to mental, emotional, and physical pain and disease? I believe because the world tells us we're not enough. Unprocessed trauma creates limiting beliefs and perceptions about ourselves, which cause us to hold on to fear, hold on to shame or guilt. And then we think, feel, and behave in ways that embed those beliefs. Our 24/7, fast-paced, destructive, consumptive, information overloaded world constantly drip feeds the messages that we need to do more, or we need to know more, or be more, or have more. Marketing and advertising tells us that we're not enough the way we are, and we need to look younger, or be thinner, or eat this, or drink that. And all that external noise takes us further and further away from our inner wisdom, our intuition, which sits in our heart and our soul. And it keeps us in a disempowered, victim-like state where we feel like we're being done to and we have no choices and no control. So 2 sources of wisdom that I've hugely resonated with over the last few years that have been a huge source of inspiration to me are Dr. Gabor Mate and Dr. Zach Bush. So Dr. Mate says that disease is an outcome of generations of suffering, of social conditions, of cultural conditioning, of childhood trauma, of physiology, bearing the brunt of people's stresses and emotional histories, all interacting with the physical and psychological environment. And Dr. Zach Bush says, if we're going to break humanity free, we're going to have to move to a point that we're going to stop manifesting more chronic disease with every generation. We're going to have to tap into this regenerative potential. So we have to take back our power. We have to recognize the huge amount of potential we have to tap into when we let go of limiting beliefs that we've learned to believe about ourselves, or unhelpful stories or narratives that we've learned to believe, or other people's stories projected onto us that keep us small or disempowered, or patterns of generational thinking, feeling, and behaving that tell us we're not enough and keep us small. And all change starts with ourselves. We need to be the change. We need to heal our own emotional wounds and our unprocessed trauma. We need to love all parts of ourselves, which in turn will raise our vibrational frequency individually and collectively. So I'm not claiming to be a scientist or a doctor, and I'm certainly not a quantum physics professor. Nobody understands quantum physics. But my reading and research around these topics has supported me to take back my power, to listen to the truth in my heart and soul, in order to create empowering beliefs, which in turn have created a state of balance in my body where I feel more well than I've ever felt, which really backs up Bruce Lipton's research around the power of beliefs to shape what happens in our physical bodies, in our cells. So my research and holistic approaches have supported me to practice letting go of fear that was causing me to hold on to stories that were keeping me small or keeping me ill. And that's definitely still a work in progress. As I said, I'm a lifelong learner and I'm constantly evolving and constantly learning more. And Zach Bush really explains it a lot better than I do. So if you get a chance to watch any of his videos, but particularly this one on healing disease, which I've put a link to there, I'd urge you to watch this video. So as I said, one of the sources of wisdom I've hugely resonated with over the years is Dr. Veall-20. And his research and the reading I've done of his work has supported me to embed beliefs that were helpful to me so that I could let go of old, unhelpful stories that I'd learned to believe about myself and start to embody a state of wellness. So in his wonderful book, The Myth of Normal, he says, it all starts with waking up to what is real and authentic in and around us and what isn't. Waking up to who we are and who we're not. Waking up to what our bodies are expressing and what our minds are suppressing. Waking up to our wounds and our gifts. Waking up to what we've believed and what we actually value. Waking up to what we will no longer tolerate and what we can now accept. Waking up to the myths that bind us and the interconnections that define us. Waking up to the past as it has been, the present as it is, and the future as it may yet be. And waking up most especially to the gap between what our essence calls for and what normal has demanded of us. So in The Myth of Normal, his wonderful book, he quotes V, formerly known as Eve Ensler, author of the political play The Vagina Monologues. V survived stage 4 uterine cancer and describes cancer as not a separate thing that has attacked your body. It's energy flow. It's evolution or devolution that occurs when we're not awake and connected, and when trauma is essentially ruling our lives. It's such a mistake to identify it as a thing because that makes it hard matter, when it's a much more psychological, spiritual, and emotional condition. In another of Dr. Veall-20's books, When the Body Says No, he talks about type C personalities. So these are the types of people we might describe as nice people, or people pleasers. The ones who will never say no to a request and will always put others' needs before their own. You've probably all heard of type A and type B personalities. So people with type A personalities may be ambitious or aggressive or competitive. And people with type B personalities may be laid back, flexible, or patient. So personality refers to the pattern of emotions, thoughts, and behaviours that make each individual who they are. But Dr. Maté talks about type C personalities. And remember, those are patterns of emotions, thoughts, and behaviours. So they can be unlearned. So these type C personality traits can be linked to emotional wounds where an individual has learnt to put others' needs before their own and suppress emotions to avoid making caregivers uncomfortable, as those caregivers were likely not resourced to be able to support the individual to process those emotions in a healthy way. And if we don't feel worthy of love, connection, and belonging, just the way we are, we may seek status to feel important or to help others ahead of ourselves. And as children, we don't know how to think, as we haven't developed that part of our brain yet. We only know how to feel. The felt sense comes before thinking. So what we felt will dictate what we then think when we're able to learn how to think. So those formative years are so instrumental. And the unconscious script that we may have learnt in those types of emotional wounds is something like, I'm only lovable, or I'm only worthy of love if I put others' needs before my own, for example. And this is not about blaming parents or caregivers. It's about understanding what that 95% unconscious programming is, so that we can then take responsibility and take back our power for showing up in our life the way we want to, so that we can live a heart-led and healthy life, so that we can meet our own needs whilst empathizing with others and showing compassion. So that type C personality that Dr. Matte talks about, that was me, the people pleaser, the person who suppressed her emotions and didn't speak her truth for fear of being rejected or abandoned, or fear of upsetting people or causing conflict. That was me until I learned how to find my voice and start to take back my power through holistic healing practices like Reiki and energy healing and meditation, kinesiology, and homeopathy. And through the inner child process, which I now practice with clients, and somatic exercises to help release stuck energy from the body. And as I mentioned earlier, it's still a work in progress for me, and it always will be. And that little girl within me needs regular reassurance from me that I've got her back and I'm going to keep her safe, especially in public speaking situations, which are way out of my comfort zone. But I also know it's my opportunity to practice what I preach and show that little girl within me that it's okay to not be perfect. And the success in this situation is just in doing my best. So over the past 4 years, since my cancer diagnosis, I've hugely resonated with the work of Dr. Peter Levine, with his 45 years worth experience of helping people heal from trauma and his somatic re-experiencing approach. So he talks about how animals in the wild perfectly model how to complete the trauma cycle. So when they're faced with a threat by a predator, a huge amount of energy is produced to make them strong so they can fight that threat or run away from it. So the fight or flight response discharges that energy from the body. But the other survival response is the freeze response, where the biology of the animal tells them that they're more likely to survive if they play dead. And when that threat has passed and the predator is no longer a threat, they shake vigorously and they breathe deeply to release the energy that has been charged. But because of our conditioning and our social needs to belong to something bigger than ourselves, human beings are not so good at this completion of the trauma cycle in order to come out of that freeze response, having been faced with either a real or a perceived threat. So we suppress the emotion. And that then creates blockages in the flow of our energy and blockages in the body's ability to heal. It creates avoidance strategies where we distract ourselves from feeling what we've labeled as negative feelings, and where we've added a narrative that we're not good enough or we can't speak our truth as we'll be rejected or abandoned, for example. So a body in a freeze response is working overtime to constrict against movement. So every desired expression from speaking, moving, and doing is literally held back by the muscles of your body. So reconnecting with the body in a safe and gradual way enables you to reconnect with the stuck energy so that it can be felt and released in a safe way. And releasing that energy enables you to then release the stories that you've attached to the avoidance of those feelings. And in my case, start to take action and gather evidence that it is actually safe to speak my truth without being rejected or abandoned. And I am actually more than enough. So in conclusion, does love triumph over fear? This presentation was about love versus fear. My opinion is absolutely. When we can understand ourselves at deeper level, understand that 95% unconscious programming, we can start to integrate fragmented parts of ourselves that we learn to avoid or deny because we believed they weren't good enough or worthy of love. We can start to own our weaknesses and our mistakes as well as our strengths, so that we don't project parts of ourselves that we haven't acknowledged or we haven't accepted about ourselves onto other people. And we can start to set healthy boundaries to manage our time and our energy, to show ourselves that we respect and value ourselves. And we can show up authentically in relationships and allow ourselves to be vulnerable, which is how we connect from the heart with other people. And one of my favorite quotes is from a wonderful lady called Brené Brown, who's written some amazing books. And she said, "How can you let people see the real you if you're afraid of what they might see?" And that quote has stuck with me for years as I've learned to be kind to myself and love my whole self and not be ashamed of what people might see. And when we show up authentically, people feel safe in our presence. They feel safe in our energy. So imagine you're the parent to the child who's still within you, that felt sense, that child who needs you as the resourced adult to show them that they're safe and loved just the way they are. So my invitation to you today is to reparent yourself so that you can be the safe container for yourself, to be able to feel and release whatever emotion arises. An emotion is a signpost to what makes us feel safe or unsafe or happy or sad or angry. It's supposed to be felt and released, not suppressed. So reparent yourself so you can love all parts of yourself, especially all the parts you learned to believe weren't lovable. And reparent yourself so you don't have to avoid or distract yourself from those parts through busyness or alcohol or drugs or overworking or overthinking, for example. Reparent yourself so you can listen to your needs and wants and clearly communicate them in an adult to adult way. And reparent yourself so you can listen to your needs and wants and set healthy boundaries to manage your time and energy. And reparent yourself so you can live a heart-led and healthy life, raise your vibrational frequency, and co-create a more peaceful world. So as I mentioned earlier, I've got a free guide, which is called 5 Ways to Live a Heart-Led and Healthy Life, based on my experience and my story. So please do go ahead and click on that QR code if you'd like a link to that. And I'm writing a book, as I also mentioned, about my story, my healing journey following the cancer diagnosis in 2020. And that's called Trust. And if you'd like any updates to that book, then please do go ahead and scan the QR code there. So it's been a pleasure to join you today. Thank you for having me.
That was a quite informative session, Sarah. Thoroughly like the way you explained us about the healing of your journey by balancing body and also the brain. Your incredible healing journey following the diagnosis of the cancer may inspire many patients to approach this way rather than the classical allopathic approach. So that would be helpful for many patients across the globe. Thank you for the incredible.
Thank you. I'm struggling to hear you a little bit. My apologies.
Sorry.
Sorry. We have few questions from our audiences. So
Okay.
we will let you know one question. Okay. So could you please answer it?
Which question?
Yeah. What role does self-care play in your approach as a transformational coach?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
What role does self-care play in your approach as a transformational coach?
Can you show me where the question is? Like, I'm struggling to understand. Okay, thank you. So self-care is everything. So everything is about loving your whole self. So when we can meet our own needs, as I mentioned, we can feel safe to be ourselves. We can feel safe to be in our bodies in the present moment, so that we can listen to our intuition and feel what is right for us. We can be an authentic version of ourselves in order to show up authentically in relationships. And when we do that, we create that safety for the other person as well. We give them permission to be themselves as well. So we're not masking any aspects of ourselves. We're loving our whole self just the way we are. So yes, self-care is everything.
Thank you for your answers, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have our next speaker, Daniel Swatch. So can you please join our next session?